Hello everyone, this is JPL, and today I am joined with,
Jay here.
And Christopher.
and we are a podcast name in brackets. Here we are continuing our monthly series talking about our top 5 films of years, and today we'll be talking about the top 5 films of the year 2005. Oh boy,
Ooh.
2005. Very influential year for me specifically, so this is going to be fun.
I feel like you say that every episode.
But this one, no. This one specifically is influential. The other years, I'm saying like, oh, I'm remembering stuff. This one's like, my core character starts being built here.
Okay.
If you understand what I mean. But anyway, Jay, why don't you tell us about the box office of this year?
Yeah, so just to give an overall basic view of what this year looks like, we have top 10 at the box office. I won't go through all of them, but we have Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire at number 1, Star Wars Revenge of the Sith at number 2, Lion the Witch and the Wardrobe is there. Um, War of the Worlds, the Tom Cruise, Steven Spielberg War of the Worlds, Madagascar. So we're seeing this is an interesting list because we have only 2 sequels here, the Harry Potter and the Star Wars. So they're at the top of the list here. Um, but yeah, we have besides that we have a ton of remakes. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, obviously based on a book. Um, War of the Worlds, I believe Mr. and Mrs. Smith is also a remake. I don't know that off the top of my head. We are also seeing the start of several franchises. We have the Narnia trilogy, the Disney Walden Media Narnia trilogy, Madagascar, of course, and at the bottom of the top 10, Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy with Batman Begins, starting out a little lower in the box office, but we will be seeing that making a return in a few years. And yeah, this also struck me as like a very movie star heavy year. um, Already brought up Mr. and Mrs. Smith. That's Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, Tom Cruise in War of the Worlds, Will Smith in Hitch, Johnny Depp in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Yeah, it's interesting to see all of these in the top 10. A lot of these are propelled by the star rather than being sequels or remakes,
Right, Jack
or
Black and King
franchise.
Kong.
Yeah, sure. We can count that. I don't know if he's quite the same caliber of star at this point, but yeah,
What?
something that we don't really see today. Usually, it's more franchises or directors who are drawing people in. Very rarely directors, even. That's basically only Nolan. So yeah, we also have Oscars. We have the nominees are Brokeback Mountain, Capote, Crash, which is the winner, Good Night and Good Luck, and Munich. This is obviously a very controversial year. Crash beat out the critical favorite Brokeback Mountain. It is often cited as one of the worst Best Picture winners ever. I saw it. I thought it was fine. I understand why people think it's a bad winner. It is a very it has a very simplistic approach to some very heavy topics. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Our
Uh-huh.
Cannes winner is The Sun, and then the Razzie winner is Dirty Love. Another one of those Razzie movies that like no one ever talks about at all. It's just kind of like gone from the cultural consciousness.
Well then, why don't we get into our list here? As usual, we start with number 5, go down to 1, and we also talk about our least favorites. So yeah, Jay, why don't you start us off with number 5?
Yeah, so at number 5 I have Neil Marshall's The Descent. Um, Iconic horror film, often cited as like one of the best of the 2000s. This follows a group of women who go exploring in a cave. Things go wrong, and they realize they might not be alone down there. Um, this is a really weird mix of sensibilities. You have like the 2000s horror type stuff. There's a lot of jump scares, which was really, really fun because modern horror doesn't use jump scares as much. So it was just kind of fun to see all of the, oh, that's kind of silly jump scares there. We have the attractive women, and the camera wants you to know that they're attractive. Lots of schlocky violence, but then it's also like there's some elements here that feel more in line with like modern quote unquote elevated horror. This has like a very somber tone, some more complex characters, heavy themes, including like grief is a major through line for this. It isn't quite like the monster is a representation for grief, luckily, because I'm tired of that trope. But it has those like those little aspects there. So it's really a like weird clash of sensibilities that's just kind of fun to watch from like a modern perspective, as this definitely feels like a stepping stone to the A24 films, even though this is very different from a modern day A24 horror film. Um, some really great cinematography and design. They actually like built the cave part so that they could film more easily because it's very difficult to film in caves. But they're doing a lot of like low light that kind of hides the built quality of stuff, and so it's very convincing. And there's just like a whole bunch of different light sources. They have like headlamps, they have flares, they have glow sticks, and eventually like the group gets split up, and each group has like a different light source that's a different color, so you always know which group you're with. And when they're interacting, then it's like the two colors come together. It's very smart, very subtle as well. Like I noticed that because I like to look at the lighting for this kind of stuff, but it is really well integrated there. And it's also just like a very scary movie. It's creepy crawlies underground, very tense, a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. Have either of you heard of
I'm
this one?
so I'm gonna have to like state this here, so that I'm not gonna repeat this the entire thing. Most of your guys' films I've not heard of or seen, so
Okay.
I'll say it here and now, so I'm not gonna have to say it 10 more times.
Okay. Yeah, I've not heard of this, and I was first alerted to it with Jay logging it.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. My fifth pick is a movie called Marathon. It's, you guessed it, a South Korean movie. Um, it was I think the fourth gross, highest grossing domestic movie that year, I believe. Um, we follow a man with autism. Um, yeah, this movie's a little uneven because it's definitely his story through and through. At the beginning, we kind of follow like um, someone who coaches him who's kind of fallen from grace a little bit. Specifically, he has a DUI, um, and he's doing community hours for, and he ends up training him. And then in the second half of the movie, we kind of see what I thought was very interesting, the perspective from the mom, and for her raising a child with the condition. And yeah, so which, I mean, I've not seen a lot of movies of this type, but I thought was a unique exploration compared to what I'm familiar with existing. Um, yeah, I'm not like completely over the moon about the movie. I gave it 3 stars on Letterboxd. But it's very interesting watching. If this movie is up your alley, then it's worth a shot.
Yeah, I haven't seen this one.
You know me. Well, I guess that means I move on to my number 5. I find that like my number 5s are usually my like non-serious picks. They're just, oh, here's like a random one I'll decide to talk about for this month. So this month I'm going to be talking about the animated film The Batman vs. Dracula. Uh, this is inspired same direction from the Batman animated series of 2004, so same world, same character, same design, and all that. So that's fun. That was my show that I was watching while it was airing, so that was fun. So yeah, about this one is that the people from the show wanted to make an animated film they specifically wanted to do it with like a different villain, but then I guess Warner Brothers was like, no, you're off limits from using that character because DC has a weird embargo with some things, so they're using it for something else. They're not allowed to use it for other things, so they couldn't use the character they wanted. So then somewhere someone said somewhere, why don't you do some with Dracula? And so yeah, they made this film with Batman versus Dracula. And so then the studio's like, okay, we made this film. Can we make another one? And the studio's like, yeah, except why don't you make it with a different Universal monster? And so the creative team was like, how about we don't? So they never made another one. Anyway, I find this one to be really fun. You know, just the idea of Batman battling Dracula is like, huh, you wouldn't really think it, but it sounds pretty cool. And it is pretty cool. It is cool to see this Batman fight off against vampires and some DC characters interacting with Dracula, some of them becoming vampires themselves. It's fun. There's there is like some things that seem cool on screen, but when you think about it, it's like kind of dumb. There's an image of here with Bruce Wayne holding a thing that says Dracula on it. So basically, he writes a name and puts it on the mirror because Dracula backwards is Alucard. And it's like, huh, Alucard. He writes it out, shows it in the mirror, it's this Dracula. And like that's really cool for like the audience perspective. But like Batman would probably just never do something like that. It's like, oh, in my head. He would do that in his head, but it is a cool visual for kids to see. So that's my takeaway from this film. Yeah, the action's pretty cool. Unfortunately, though, I think the downside of this film is that it's like never mentioned in the show at all. Like none of the characters from this film show up in the show, and vice versa. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I thought it was just like common knowledge that Alucard was Dracula backwards, but whatever. Yeah, I have not heard of this besides just as like Batman versus Dracula movie. Um, I am intrigued. Maybe I will check it out eventually. But yeah, I have not seen it.
It's a fun little time. Well, then we should move on to our number fours.
Yeah, so my number 4 I have directed by Joe Wright. This is Pride and Prejudice, a relatively faithful adaptation of the Jane Austen novel. Anyone who isn't familiar with it, it's a romance, period romance. I guess it wasn't period because she was writing it contemporary, but yeah, it's a romance. British aristocrat, or I don't know, maybe they're gentry. I don't know what the difference is. Um, we have Elizabeth Bennet and her whole family, and she's unmarried with 4 unmarried sisters, and that's a whole problem because this is England and you have to be married if you're a woman. And she meets this man named Darcy who is very wealthy and very proud and is put off by his haughty demeanor. But then she slowly realizes that her assumptions about him were wrong, and he sort of reveals himself to be a different man than she had assumed him to be, and they fall in love. Pride and Prejudice. Yeah, it's a very effective but simple story. Um, there's a whole lot going on. There's all of her sisters have various little romances that they're doing, and they all intersect with the main romance here. There's a lot of just like fun stuff. Jane Austen is a very witty writer, and that really comes off in this adaptation. I also just love the visuals. Like this kind of adaptation, there are so many Pride and Prejudice adaptations out there. So if you can make it stand out with really good visuals, then that's a big point in your favor. And this one just makes incredible use of like the British countryside and all of the gorgeous like old houses there. We also have some very incredible performances, lots of wonderful actors who all of the sisters except for one have like gone on to become big deals. Rosamund Pike is there, Jenna Malone, and um, oh, I'm blanking on her name, Carrie Mulligan. of course. Keira Knightley as the lead here. Yeah, it's a very good adaptation of a very good book.
We read the book for English class in high school, correct?
I didn't. You might have, because we had one English
I
class that we didn't take together.
oh yeah, that's right. I took a British literature course, and for that
Yeah.
we had to read this book. I skimmed it slash listened to the audiobook and then fell asleep in the middle of it. Uh, so I have seen this film, I think, but in class they showed us the BBC miniseries,
Yes.
which is the one that I prefer over this one. I don't remember
Yeah,
anything
that tends
anymore.
to be the British miniseries is much longer and so has more time to develop the romance and the relationship. I've seen it once. I've been meaning to see it again, but that's a very like totemic thing in terms of Jade Austen adaptations. Yeah,
Hmm.
I thought this one worked very well, and I think it takes advantage of like the budget that you get as a film versus a TV miniseries to have some very striking visuals.
I might have written an essay about these two films and their contrasts,
Okay.
but I don't. Again, I don't care at all for Jane Austen, so I don't remember anything. So yeah. How about you, Christopher?
Added to my watch list.
All right, tell us what you've seen then.
Oh yeah. My roommate is quite a big Rachel McAdams fan, and so um, I think for birthday or Christmas, I got a movie he'd already seen, but Paramount Pictures has a line called Paramount Presents, and it's pretty cool because the slipcover has like this fold out poster of like embedded with like the slipcover, so like a flap on the slipcover of like the original poster, which is pretty cool. I have a couple of Paramount Presents releases myself. Not to mention, it was also one initially it was just Blu-rays, and then they started doing it with 4K discs. Anyways, um, but so Red, I finally sat down to watch for myself, because he owns it. I will say I also do like Rachel McAdams, but he's definitely a super fan. But whatever. I thought it was also very interesting seeing Killian Murphy some
Yeah,
15,
this is
20
back
years.
when they were like trying to test him out as like a movie star,
Yeah,
like a leading man, which is
very
always
fat.
interesting to go back.
Yeah, very fascinating, especially seeing what happened with like Oppenheimer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I really thought it was a really solid thriller. Obviously, like how contained it is in the airplane for most of the movie. Um, like very fascinating, very tense. Of like, what do you do in such a confined space of like someone confronting you the way he does, kind of thing. And also, uh, my roommate was like, he really likes the airplane scenes, but he kind of thought like once they leave the airplane, it kind of goes downhill. And I said, well, I found out that it's the same director as Scream. And
Yeah.
honestly, so like that chase at the end kind of just really makes sense from a director who directed Scream. And it's just a more, the more that thriller action bent, but again, he has a horror tendency to it all. Um, and in my opinion, it kind of made sense, kind of, even though she's the only girl, kind of like that final girl esque, um, of the character, especially at the end. Yeah, overall, like it made me clutch my pillow. So I think it did its job really well. Really enjoyable. And it's also really short. I think it's only like 80 minutes. So it also worked out
Not
really
bad.
well for like the timing. It was like, oh, I'm a little tight on time, but I could do 80 minutes. So it's also nice and succinct. Like I have nothing against long movies, but sometimes like when you need to do something like go to work in 2 hours. It fit in really well in terms of time. So yeah, if you need a little shorty red eye.
Yeah, I am intrigued by this film now that you have brought it to my attention.
And you know
I bet
me.
John loves it.
It's his number one of the year.
Oh yeah.
Spoilers.
Oh. Anyway, moving on to something I've actually seen. For number 4, I have the Fantastic Four. They came out this year, so yeah. Um, I guess this is kind of one of those influential films for me, in that out before this, the main Marvel characters that I was mostly familiar with was just like Spider-Man, X-Men, and the Hulk. And so here I get introduced to like a whole other section of Marvel with the Fantastic Four and Doctor Doom. Of the Fantastic Four films that were officially released, this is my favorite so far.
Wait, so you like the unreleased one better?
I have not seen that
The
one,
TV? Okay.
but the costumes do look cool. I'll say that. But yeah,
Okay.
no, I just love the way things look in this film. It's like the costumes look perfect, comic accurate. It's like, man, I wish more superhero costumes were like this simple and well done. The Thing is practical, which is great. It looks cool.
Yeah.
Doctor Doom, you know, say what you say about his character, but at least like he looks like Doctor Doom, and it's cool. Uh, sure, there are some like writing issues here and there, but it's fun, enjoyable. The characters are mostly their characters for the most part, and yeah, it was like a cool superhero origin thing. I think I read the children book thing. You know, sometimes like they'll have like a 10-page children book thing with images of the
Yeah.
film in it. I think I read that first, and then I saw the film or something. I don't know. Something happened somewhere. But yeah, this was a film, and I enjoyed it. There you go.
Yeah. I'm going to save my thoughts on this for a later time because I think they will fit better there.
All right.
I'll just say something about this. I think it's enjoyable for kind of what it is. Like, I think I went into this with low expectations, um, especially considering kind of how hated Fantastic Four movies are. Yeah, it's it's definitely nothing incredible, but I think I found more enjoyment from it than I expected to. I'll I'll put it that way.
Yeah. Well, moving on to number 3 then.
Yeah, so my number 3, I have Rian Johnson's Brick. This is, I believe, his debut feature. It may have been his second feature. Um, this is an old school noir film set in a modern day high school. And it has all of the tropes of like noir. It has this hard boiled detective, who in this case is Jason Gordon Levitt's character, who is a high schooler, but he has like all of the hard boiled detective traits. There's a femme fatale, there's a shadowy mastermind antagonist, the heavy, there's a lot of like moral ambiguity, lots and lots of smoking. And it's all happening in this high school. It's really really odd, but really really fun. I did expect it to be a little bit more comedic, just having heard of it before, and this definitely has moments of comedy, but it does take itself pretty seriously, and it makes for a very unpredictable tone. Like you're never quite sure how any scene is going to play out, because it could play out more comedically or it could play out more seriously. Um, which I just had a lot of fun with it. In that sense, I think Johnson does a very good job of understanding genre and doing interesting things with the genre, which is always fun. It's also just like a very just like the contrast between the genre and the setting is so much fun because yeah, they're running around to high school, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt is like talking like an old-timey detective in high school. It's just it's a lot of fun just the way that contrasts, and the dialogue, all of the dialogue is so serious, but then of course there's like, oh, there's one scene, I don't want to say too much, but where characters are having this very intense conversation, and then one of the characters' mom is like offering, does anyone want a glass of orange juice, just like this reminder of like, oh yeah, these are teenagers in high school doing this noir. It's also just like very visually inventive. This was a very low budget film, but there's several sequences, a couple of action sequences, a chase sequence, just some very inventive visual things that are going on that I really enjoyed. Have either of you heard of this one?
I have heard of it. I have a friend who's quite a Ryan Johnson fan. Um, and so I kind of I have not seen anything in full from Ryan Johnson. So I do not have a hard opinion, but like he's also one of those who loves The Last Jedi, which I do like to joke to say that it's my favorite Star Wars film, just to annoy Star Wars fans. Um, it's funny. That's the only movie of the sequel trilogy I have in my watch list on Letterboxd. um, but I don't have anything against the guy, but it definitely it's funny hearing him talk about Ryan Johnson, and I kind of sit and nod sometimes because when you haven't seen something and you don't have an opinion, there's nothing else you can really do but sit and nod. Um, and then I also saw either Kino Lorber or Shout Factory recently released this on 4K, so
Oh, very
I'm familiar with its existence, but haven't seen it yet.
You know me.
You've definitely seen it.
It's your favorite movie of all time.
Yeah. Yeah. How about you, Christopher? Number 3?
Number 3, I have a movie called The Bow. This is a movie. It's a beautiful looking movie. It all takes place basically on a boat. But it features a complex relationship of a 16-year-old man and I think she's and a 16-year-old girl. Um, and kind of the clock is ticking down for when she turns 17 that uh, they will marry. My asterisk to that, I don't know what the laws are in South Korea. However, not until last year, they've had this age based off the lunar calendar. Intrinsically, with that, they would be a year older with that calendar compared to the international age. If I'm remembering this detail correctly from the movie, I think she's 16 and she's turning 17, and at 17 she'd get married. So in theory, that's her being close to 18, if not 18, with what we are familiar of the international age. Just thought I'd throw that out. Um, but it still is a complex idea, and I do want to pull up a quote from the director. um, he says, "It is not my purpose to offend people, but the things I show in my films are genuine problems in our society. If mainstream society distances itself from the class of people I show in my films, it will only cause deeper conflicts. With my films, I want to help both sides understand each other." And so I respect the director for tackling hard subject. I forgot also another detail of said movie. So most of the people who come on the boat to fish, are older men, 40s to 60s esque range. But then on no one day, like we'll say a 20-year-old comes on board, and that's like the first young person that the girl has seen. She's instantly drawn to him, so that completely throws a wrench into her relationship with the 60-year-old man. um, and so yeah, it's it's a hard movie to watch. It's really hard to watch, but it's also incredibly beautiful. And I think I am very drawn to the beauty of the movie and its complexity, and also kind of like hearing where the director comes from. It's very fascinating. Um, so yeah, it's complicated, very, very much for sure. But I'm very fascinated by this movie. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I had to turn to this one and wasn't familiar with the plot. That is a tension that, just off the top of my head, like the Sweeney Todd musical is dealing with a similar situation though, and that probably presents it in a more straightforward way than this one does. Um, yeah, I don't know. Looking at the visuals, it does seem intriguing, but I don't know. The plot might be more than me for to be interested in it at this point.
Yeah, and
But
that's
it is
understandable.
nice to hear that it's like dealing with it in a complex and nuanced way.
Yeah. Uh, the director seems fascinating to me. We'll see if I get to some of his other movies. They seem to also deal with other hard subjects, and so at least I'm a little more aware going into the director's filmography in the future. Like, oh, this is not going to be an easy movie to watch. Because
Yeah.
like I kind of, it's funny because sometimes when I start a movie, I might like skim over like the synopsis on Letterbox, or maybe I saw that synopsis like forever ago. So sometimes there's a degree where it's like I didn't really see that. Maybe they didn't mean it, and then I start the freaking movie like, oh, they meant it. Oh, that's actually what the movie's about. It was so hard. Like my roommate came home and was like, I'm willing to start this movie over. Will you watch this movie? He's like, heck no, not today. So I had to continue watching it on my own. I don't recall if I had to pause at moments to like kill the cringe within. But yeah, again, very fascinating, and again, yeah, I'm again intrigued to see what else the director has, and also it is like the only feature from this director I've seen. So I don't know how the director approaches it with other films. Also, I'm still learning about cinema. I don't fully understand all the nuances that goes into a movie like this, so I'm still struggling to understand to a degree. And there are people who have watched movies from this director who are positive, and people who are negative. And um, yeah, so I'm definitely not expecting people to like this movie, and definitely at face value is very difficult, but very fascinating at the same time.
You know me.
It's your favorite movie.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
number
moving
one on
on
your list.
to
You have like a big
my
tie at your number one. He's like setting up the surprise. Like, I haven't seen all these movies, but at number one, he's gonna be like, you know what? Joke's on you. I've seen all these movies, and these are my favorite movies of the year.
Yep. Joke's on me. Well, moving on to my number 3, I have Batman Begins. Now, before earlier, I was talking about like this year was influential, and here's one of the reasons why. Batman Begins, I believe, is my very first DC film that I ever watched.
Oh.
Possibly my very first Batman film that I've ever watched, film wise. Before this point, I have never purposefully had watched anything Batman or DC related at this point. I might have seen an episode or two of Justice League. I might have seen the 60s Batman, but mostly my Batman knowledge of this time was like, oh, friends at school were talking about it. I might have had like a cheap knockoff toy. Uh, one specific memory was I was getting a haircut at a child haircut place in the US, and sometimes they would put on like a cartoon, and I think I watched an episode of Batman the Animated Series while I was getting a haircut. I don't remember anything about that episode except for the intro. So this was definitively my first like Batman thing that I chose to see. I remember, you know, it's like one of my first experiences of like, oh, John, look at the computer. Oh, look, there's like a screenshot image of an upcoming Batman movie. And the image was like Batman holding Rachel's unconscious body, and that was like something that stuck with me. But on the day that I watched this film, I was playing with my toys, and my mother came up to me. It's like, "Hey, John, we're gonna go to the movies. I'm gonna give you a choice of what we're gonna see today. You can either watch Batman or King Kong." And to me, it was like, "Huh, Batman sounds like a much cooler thing, so I guess I'll watch that." And you know what? I still have never seen King Kong, so
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, it's always one of those things where it's like, okay, I have to see this at some point because that was the other option that I was given as a kid, but I still have never seen the film.
Well, it's
So
like 5 hours long.
yeah, that's also why it's really long. Um, but yeah, no, Batman Begins. We've done a whole podcast about Nolan films. We've talked about Batman Begins there. Uh, what I go check that out on Binging Barbie. What I've said about this film is I like it. I've seen it enough times to the point where I never have to see it again because the entire plot is just already in my head. So, yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
Jay.
I have also done a podcast about this one with you, so I will leave my thoughts for people who go and see that. But yeah, this is a very good introduction to the Nolan vision of Batman. And also, I think the closest that Christopher Nolan has come to making horror in certain sequences, and it makes me curious to see him do an actual horror film.
Out of curiosity, have you seen like he did a 3 minute short like in the '90s called Doodlebug?
Oh yeah, I've seen that. That's a good point. That is a little bit closer to.
Would be very fascinating to see Christopher Nolan embrace horror for a movie one day.
Yeah,
I feel like, sorry, not to get sidetracked so much, but especially like at the position he is, like seeing the next movie being the Odyssey, it kind of makes sense that since he has like the budget on his side, he'd go all out for a grand epic. And I don't blame him.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I like Batman Begins a lot. I think I've only seen it one time, so I don't necessarily have a lot of recollection of it. Um, but yeah, it's solid, and I think it's possible I saw this. Yeah, I think I saw this after seeing Star Wars. So seeing Liam Neeson was it was cool seeing him in another project. So yeah, solid movie. I do want to revisit one day because it's been long enough. So um, yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
moving on to our number twos.
Yeah. So my number two is Noah Baumbach's The Squid and the Whale. This is inspired by Noah Baumbach's childhood. For anyone who doesn't know, Noah Baumbach is, of course, the director of Marriage Story most recently, and then also co-writer of Barbie with his partner Greta Gerwig. Um, but yeah, this is inspired by his childhood, kind of loosely, from what I understand. But it's about a family of four living in New York City, and they have to navigate life after divorce. The oldest son is a teenager in high school, played by Jesse Eisenberg, and he kind of sides more with the dad, whereas the youngest kid, who's in like middle school, sides more with the mom. And we see how this kind of affects their perspectives on the world and on events and how they're approaching each other and their relationships. And yeah, I'm surprised how invested I was in this because my parents are not divorced. I don't know many people who have gone through divorce who are children of divorce. So I don't have like a very close personal connection to this. And yet I was very invested in the film and all of the different situations and relationships that pop up. This is a very like the characters here are very messy and messed up and imperfect, but you empathize with them because of the situation that they're in. This not imperfect family that they find themselves in. They say and do horrible things to each other and to the people around them, and it asks you to kind of like go on this journey with them and understand them without being too judgmental. There is kind of a character who is at fault for a lot of this stuff, but that's not what the film is about. The film is about giving each of these characters their space, and understanding where they're coming from and what's going on with them. So yeah, I was very impressed by this, going in not expecting to relate much to it, and yet finding it a very well made film. This definitely takes the perspective of the kids, which is interesting because Noah Baumbach later with Marriage Story, that's divorced from the perspective of parents. Um, so he's made sort of two of the definitive films about divorce, which I find very interesting.
Yeah,
You
when I
know
told
me.
you log it, watch list. And yeah, we know John, it's his number one. It's a big tie up there.
Yep. All right, Christopher.
hmm So I have at my number 2, The Chronicles of Narnia and the Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. Actually, thinking about it, when I wasn't that into movies, I think for a time I did call this my favorite. For those who know or don't know me, my favorite of all time is Wally. Um, and I watched that at a young age. I think I was 9, so which was basically 2009. Um, but I think I don't know what happened because I feel like to a large degree Wally has always been my favorite film since I'd seen it. Um, but maybe it didn't come to mind when I might have declared this my favorite. I think why I probably declared it my favorite uh, at some of those younger ages was maybe because I really liked its adaptation, um, based off reading the book. Um, and then it was definitely when I had seen it a second time some years later, where there were some things about it that didn't work for me, specifically the crazy amounts of slow mo. I think it's a little off putting. Um, oh, used a little too much. But whether it was truly my favorite movie or if it was second to Wally, I can't deny that I really enjoyed this movie. Um, and I still think highly of it, just as a pretty decent No, I say decent just because it's been a while of either reading the book or movie. But from what I remember, really enjoying the adaptation of it. Um, yeah, it's an enjoyable movie. Yeah.
Yeah, this is we've talked a lot on these episodes about sort of memories of going to the theater to see these. This is the first film I can recall seeing in the theater. I know of at least one that I saw before. The first film I was present in a theater for was The Phantom Menace when I was a few months old. Obviously don't have any memories of that. But no, Lord or Chronicles of Narnia, that Freudian slip that will come back later. Um, yeah, I remember sitting down to the theater, and my parents had gone beforehand to make sure that it was appropriate for my sister and I, and then they brought us to see this. And I think we saw it like 4 or 5 times in the while it was in theaters. Just kept going back and rewatching it, and I really liked it at the time. I think as I've gotten older and reread the Narnia books, and I actually took a course on the Narnia books in college, so I have studied into like what is going on with the Narnia books. I do appreciate it a little bit less. This is definitely Narnia by way of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, down to filming in New Zealand for a lot of the big sequences. It's this big epic fantasy, which I think does work for certain elements, but then there is sort of the book has a little bit more whimsy and is a little bit less intense, in a way that like this adaptation doesn't quite get. Um, but yeah, no, this is, I do have very fond memories growing up with this. James McAvoy as Mr. Tumnus. I forgot that he was Mr. Tumnus, and then someone pointed it out to me and was like, "Oh, that is incredible that I never made that connection." Tilda Swinton, my favorite actor ever, Tilda Swinton. This is like a big breakout for her as a performer as the White Witch, and she is just incredible. I love her at everything. But yeah, I am curious now that Greta Gerwig is going to be doing an adaptation of some sort of Narnia. I am curious to see if her adaptation is a little bit closer to what I like about the books.
Yeah, you know me. Um, no, I've actually seen this one.
Yeah,
I've
I was
seen this.
about to say, John.
Yeah, no, yeah, I really liked it when it came out, but as I grew older, I watched it less and less, and I think it's been over a decade since I've seen these films. So it's just like a thing that I knew that I once liked a lot, but just haven't really had much of the desire to go back to it. I've never read any of the books, so that's probably something that's like added to that thing. But I remember when this came out, I enjoyed it. And I think I remember there was like this McDonald's Happy Meal toy.
Yes.
Was it the diorama of like the lamp and such? I remember there was
I didn't
something
have
there.
that one, but I did have one of the McDonald's toys.
Did they came with like dioramas of like the scenes or something?
I don't know.
I,
I'd have to look that up. I have vague memories of. I'm gonna look this up while you
Yeah, but like that was like the one thing that I remembered was like going to McDonald's and then getting the toy with like a visual diorama of like a thing. The diorama I
Oh yeah,
had
look,
was like,
yep, they do have dioramas with the
yep,
toys.
it was the lamp. It was like the lamp with Mr. Tumnus. I don't know what toy I got, but that was just the thing that I remembered the most. I was like, oh, cool, this thing, that's neat. Um, I think also it's like I didn't quite like the sequels as much, so that just kind of led to me not watching the original as much. So yeah, no,
I
that
think
is
that's
my
also,
history.
yeah, I think that's one thing. I've personally not seen the sequels. As much as I really like it, and I kind of do want to watch the sequels at some point. Yeah, I haven't seen them yet, so I don't have baggage as it relates to the future of the visual franchise. Um, but yeah, also to your point, like I am curious to see what Gerwig will do. Um, yeah,
I guess speaking of uh oh, Liam Neeson, he's Aslan in this one.
Yep, yep.
Yeah. Oh, I guess it's my turn for
it
number
is your
two then.
turn.
Yeah. My number two film, uh, continuing this trend I've been doing, and it's Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Yeah. This
Yeah,
is, this one is my personal favorite Harry Potter film, which might be like I don't know, an unpopular opinion to say, but I like this one because there's just so much going on in it. And that's like a lot of the criticism that people have with this one is because the book is so huge that's like it's really should have been two films, but they jammed it all in like 2 hours here. And that's what I liked about this one. There's like so much stuff happening. It's a tournament. There's like different things going on. The ending is like, oh, that's pretty cool. You got dragons, you got evil, you got other stuff. But like other stuff behind the scenes of me in this is like, oh yeah, I don't know if any of you remember like the kids or Discovery Kids magazine or whatever magazine there was that, do you remember like Ranger Rick magazine or just other kids
I
magazines?
don't think I ever read that
now what world did you live in,
specific
John?
one.
Well, my grandmother would send me magazines, and so in the kids
Yeah.
magazines you'll sometimes see like exclusive sneak peeks for like movies that were coming up, and so I remember the sneak peeks for this film. I also remember specifically with this one, there was a Neopets game um, that had something to do with Mad Eye Moody. I love the characters in this film. This film also has David Tennant. Ooh. And also
Oh yeah,
Patrick Stewart. No, not Patrick Stewart. Robert
Robert
Pattinson.
Pattinson.
Yes. Two very similar
It would
actors.
be funny to have Patrick Stewart in the Twilight movies as Edward. That would actually be closer to his actual age of the character. Anyway, Twilight on the brain. You were saying?
Yeah, no, like I enjoyed this one. This one's fun. It's also the last like fun film before the series goes like all dark and all moody and emotional. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that this is your favorite of the bunch because this might actually be my least favorite, although I have not seen it in several years. I have caveats about the Harry Potter franchise that I have gone over in the last few episodes. If you are curious to hear me talk about why I have mixed feelings on the series as a whole, um, a lot of it has to do with J.K. Rowling and what she has done since the series. Um, yeah, I don't know. For me, I remember this one being less colorful and whimsical than even the third one, which is kind of starting to introduce these darker elements. It still has
Hmm.
bits of whimsy in there that are being brought in. This one is directed by Mike Newell, who I don't think of him as like a visually interesting director, though it looks like there are some good visuals from the trailer I'm seeing here. Yeah, I don't have strong memories of this one as being a favorite or least favorite, but yeah, just looking at the trailer, it is not inspiring me. So yeah,
Yeah, I don't know why this one's my favorite. But it just is.
yeah,
So
I think to distill. Sorry, I'm getting distracted here. I don't love the tournament idea. I think it distracts too much from the school stuff, which is the stuff I find more engaging in the series.
all
Which
right.
I wouldn't be surprised if we have opposite thoughts on that, John.
Well, whatever. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
yeah. Well, before we move on to our number ones, why don't we go and talk about our honorable mentions?
Yeah, so I have listed mine alphabetically rather than trying to rank them. So first up, I have Eon Flux. This is, of course, the live action adaptation of the MTV cartoon. I love the cartoons. What I've seen, I haven't finished the series, but the first sort of quote unquote season is just these like really weird and interesting and strangely animated, completely without dialogue, and just like the oddest plots. The whole concept of it is Eon Flux, the character, dies at the end of each little short in like this way that has been foreshadowed by the beginning. It's just a very odd series that I enjoy. The weirdness of the movie has some of those elements. They adapt probably the scene you would be most likely to be familiar with, which is the secret agents trading secret messages by kissing and using their tongues to open hidden compartments in each other's teeth, like pass the message back and forth between their mouths. Again, it's an odd show, and that is not like the oddest thing that happens by a long run. That's the like most PG rated one that you can talk about.
That's crazy.
So they do adapt that to live action. So I was like very excited to see that. But it is definitely run through this filter of like post Matrix action. Plus, it's been like toned down to a PG-13. This film has a very bad reputation. I think it's better than the Reputation, though. But I do wish it was like a little bit weirder. I think it's visually very engaging. Charlize Theron plays Eon, and then it's directed by Karen Kusama, who is a very like interesting director. Um, then I also have Barbie: Magic of Pegasus. John and I have done a whole episode on this one, but sassy princesses and roguish scoundrel adventure movies. Those are just always fun. That's a fun dynamic. And then this one has like a 3D gimmick, which I actually like went on eBay and found a copy of the DVD that still had the 3D glasses with it. And that was a lot of fun to watch the 3D scenes. Um, Brokeback Mountain, I haven't seen it in several years, so I do need to rewatch it. I think it might grow for me on rewatch, but I especially remember loving the cinematography. So yeah, I will revisit that eventually and have to form another opinion on that. One that I did watch recently, Good Night and Good Luck. This is a film about TV journalism in the McCarthy era, sort of this true story of how McCarthyism was brought down by the only TV journalist who was sort of brave enough to take on McCarthy directly. Um, it's it's a really like well constructed drama, and then David Strathairn plays the protagonist here, and it is such a good performance. Like he has the voice down for this old time TV news anchor, but he also has like so many subtle expressions. It's incredible. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. This is probably most well known now for being one of the films that kind of rescued Robert Downey Jr., made him hireable in Hollywood again. I need to rewatch it, but I do remember it being a lot of fun. Lady Vengeance, this is the Park Chan-wook film, the third in his Vengeance trilogy. He's hit or miss for me as a director. This is mostly a hit. I don't love it, but I do like a lot of elements of it. Serenity, this is the sequel series to the Firefly TV show. I have not watched it since the stuff about Joss Whedon came out, so I can't speak to that element of it. And I do have like some issues with certain character choices and how they decided to end certain character arcs, but I do
Yeah.
remember really liking this film. Yeah, I know that that's like a big deal in the fandom. Um, and then last up, I have one that I forgot to swap out images for. Stormy Night, which is an anime film from Japan that is Twilight for kids, pun somewhat intended, because it is about a goat and a wolf. And the wolf wants to eat the goat, but they become friends, though it has like very strong romantic overtones. And it's just like a very odd kids film that
Yeah. You also have V for Vendetta here.
which is on your, not to
Not
spoil anything.
anymore. No, I
Okay.
moved it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I will say about V for Vendetta. I've not seen it in several years, so I can't really comment much on it. Um, I do want to rewatch it because I remember it being very solid.
Yeah, V for Vendetta. It's a film that I always, every time I watch it, I'm like, it's a very solid film. It's also like a really good film to watch during election years. So it's always
Yeah.
very topical around those times. So
Yep.
yeah, Serenity. I think when I watched through this the first times when I watched the show, I remember being like, okay, the film is kind of what I wanted to see from the show in terms of like budget and the way things are filmed. I agree. I don't love the way they handle resolutions to characters' arcs in this film, but it is a fun, exciting sci-fi film. So, yeah. All right.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of those. And I thought I would clarify that just simply for Lady Vengeance's existence. And people would be like, "You've seen all the Korean films, right?" No. One day, I will say like I've always kind of been like squeamish as relates to like violence and gore, and kind of have been like getting over that hump over the last year or two. So I'm probably coming to a point where I'd be more open to a movie like this. Plus, also, probably the only way I can access it is with ads, and I don't want to watch this movie with ads. So,
Yeah. If you can see the like, I don't know if it's like called the fade to white version or
my
something.
my roommate mentioned that, and that I really want to see that version.
Yeah, that's what I watched. It is a very striking approach to
So
color. Yeah, yeah.
I'm very excited to. Yeah, whenever I watch it, that's the version I want to see. Oh, I guess it's my turn. I my quote honorable mentions is simply mentioning the other 2005 movies I have seen. Um, I saw Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of Were Rabbit a little over a year ago. Um, it's solid. It's fun for what it is, I guess. I think this was the first full length Wallace and Gromit I had seen. I had only been familiar with Wallace and Gromit as a specifically the Moon Cheese short. So as shorts.
The short
So
films, 20 minutes.
yeah, and I think I saw maybe someone mention, but like maybe throwing out the idea of Wallace and Gromit being maybe aided better for the the short film direction. And I, after seeing the one that they just released, Vengeance Must Foul, I feel like I agree with that sentiment. Nothing against Wallace and Gromit, but I feel like I might enjoy it in smaller chunks than full length chunks. But yeah, honestly, I did have to think about Chris Rabbit for a moment. I was like, honestly, there were some really enjoyable moments in the movie, but even though I do have nostalgia for Wallace and Gromit, not as great as it is for other people. Um,
Like me.
Pooh's Heffalump Halloween movie.
Hmm.
That's a crazy one. Randomly, within this past month, I randomly remember being at someone's place and them watching this movie. Randomly remembered that fact. So when I first got on Letterboxd and like decided to like fill it out, I hadn't seen a lot of movies, so I really filled it out. So there's only one movie I have no clue what the title is that is not on Letterboxd of what I've seen from what I can remember. So like 99%. And then also sometimes you randomly remember like, oh, that one film I did see when I was really young, and then you log it as watched. So that was the case with this. Randomly a few weeks ago, I was like, I saw that movie. What the heck? And then like went to look it up and was like, yeah. Not I don't remember anything from it, but I watched it, I guess.
Yeah.
So I will respect the fact that I saw it. The most familiar I am with any of the movies on this list is The March with the Penguins. Um, Probably really one of the few documentaries that I remember, but probably because I saw this at a younger age. I've seen this at least once, if not twice, probably twice. I had also seen its sequel as well, which is pretty much just more penguin footage. It's like, what do you do? Like, this is like the story of the life of a penguin. The sequel is basically kind of pseudo following the child, but it's basically treading over the same ground. Anyways, but still, it's memorable because it's from my youth. And I remember when I first was getting into like collecting Blu-rays, I saw it like at a thrift store for like $3. Like, yeah, why not? When I only had like 10 movies on my shelf, and now I have way more than 10. So yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have seen Wallace and Gromit, and I don't have any strong memories of it. March of the Penguins, I do remember being very tragic in a way that stuck with me. I have only ever seen it once, though, as a kid.
Yeah. I loved Wallace and Gromit. I think this was my introduction to those characters, and then after this one, I watched like all the shorts and such. I am pretty sure I own the Heffalump film. Might have seen it only once. Don't remember what happened into it. March of the Penguins. We own it, but I've never watched the film completely because I always got like really bored halfway through. So yes,
One thing I think I'll just mention Wallace and Gromit. I don't think specifically this release. I don't know. I have not looked into what I'm about to talk about in depth. So as released by Shout Factory, there's this recent 4K restoration of Wallace and Gromit. Um, the the restoration was supplied by Aardman, so it's don't blame Shout Factory except for the fact that they released it. I don't know what contracts looked like. It is a AI upscales.
Hmm.
So I don't know if this movie is part of said collection. I don't know what is in the collection, but it is not a true 4K restoration. It is AI. So you are probably better off with the Blu-ray release, but I also hear that there are issues with the Blu-ray release, not AI related. So unfortunately, you cannot win. And it really also sucks because the packaging for the 4K release looks really cool. Not something that would easily fit on a shelf, but like it looked really cool. And it's a huge shame, obviously it being AI and the effort that went into the packaging. And it's also really confusing after seeing Vengeance Most Foul, which is kind of a critique on modern technology and our usage with it, and in some ways AI. And it seems very hypocritical for Aardman to release Vengeance Most Foul and then for their 4K set to be an AI upscale.
Yeah, I saw some of the comparison images, and that is, yeah, especially with this type of animation, you're losing a whole lot of detail. And this is some of the most egregious that I have seen. There's detail that's just completely missing from the upscale version. I guess I have also seen some pretty bad upscaling, but this is the one that stood out to be the most of the stuff that I have seen.
And it really makes no sense why AI upscale. Like I do understand like one thing people like about 4K disc is the HDR, basically the enhanced colors that come with it. I understand that is one. A lot of people think that for 4K disc, it's just a resolution. No, it's also the deeper colors that come with it. I understand, but is it really worth watching an AI upscale? Like you will get more detail popping in your Blu-ray and watching that instead of this. It's really sad.
Anyway, moving on to my honorable mentions. Uh, Starting off with War of the Worlds, not because I love this one. This is a very influential film for me in that it traumatized me when I watched it. Um, I think this film is what gave me my xenophobia of like my phobia of aliens or alien invasions as a kid, because this is an alien invasion film and it's like pretty dark, and the tripods are really spooky and they have a spooky sound. There's a lot of like images that like flash through my mind, and I had so many nightmares about these specific aliens, like, oh no. I've watched it a couple times since, so like I've conquered my fear of this film. But yeah, this was one that really stuck with me for a long time. So hey, there you go. Then I have Sky High, which was like this Disney or Disney channels. I don't know. It was like this fun superhero parody film thing. I don't know. I don't haven't seen it in a long time, but I remember enjoying it. It has fun stuff. Then we have Tim Burton's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which is my favorite of the Willy Wonka stuff. Ooh, controversial opinion. And it's partially because this one is closer to the novel, to the original story, which we did read in school, so that was fun. I like the music, of course, of the other one, but this one is story wise, I prefer this one. Then we have Bionicle 3 Web of Shadows. We talked about this on our podcast. It's Bionicle film. There you go. Then we have End of the Spear, which is a biopic about Jim Palmer and his missionary friends. This one is relevant to like me and Jay because that's like the story of our environment and our field and such. So yeah. Then we have
My parents
Hoodwink.
had the bed of one of the people in this film, one of the characters or real life people depicted in the film.
Ah, yeah. Even though the film was filmed in Guatemala, so
Oh yeah, no,
yeah,
this was the person that the character was based off of. Yeah,
yeah. Just a side note. Next film is Hoodwinked. This this really weird 3D animated film that I'm surprised was as successful as it was. It's an odd one. Then we have Herbie Fully Loaded, the last Herbie film about the Volkswagen Bug 53. This one has Lindsay Lohan in it. He also has NASCAR stuff. I remember liking it and liking it a lot. There you go. And then my last honorable mention is DreamWorks Madagascar. This one was my favorite of the trilogy. Loved it a lot. Specifically, the penguins of Madagascar. They're a really fun bunch of characters. So yeah, that's my list there.
yeah. I've seen a handful of these. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the Tim Burton one. That's the one I saw as a kid. I have not rewatched it as an adult, but I do have memories of that. Bionicle, we did an episode on that. That's my favorite of the Bionicles, the Web of Shadows. That's the one that gets weird and dark, and I always enjoy that kind of stuff. End of the Spear, haven't seen it in a while. I actually did watch Hoodwinked for this episode. It is, I love the first 2/3 of this because it
Yeah,
is Rashomon for kids
yeah,
in a very fun way. It's like each different storylines that are revealing more about each other. Um, it kind of loses the plot in the third act when it starts to turn into more of like a generic kids movie. Also, the animation. There is a sequence in here that will haunt my dreams forever.
yeah.
It isn't even supposed to be scary, I don't think,
Oh,
but it is so.
Shita.
Oh,
Yeah,
it is terrifying. Um,
yeah,
Madagascar. I think I've only seen the first Madagascar once. Um, I did see the second one in theaters, but that is for a different year.
yeah.
I
How about
think
you,
I've seen
Christopher?
the last scene of End of the Spear, and I think that's it.
Okay.
Okay.
Familiar with the story, but not the movie, so no thoughts.
Yeah. Well, with that, let's move on to our number ones.
Yeah. So my number one is a not super well known outside of Canada French Canadian film, directed by Jean Marc Vallée, Crazy, or Crazy as an acronym. And it follows the life of one of five sons of a Catholic French Canadian family growing up in the 70s and 80s. And he's struggling to come to terms with his sexuality and coming of age and trying to figure out his place in the world. Let me find the writer's name because it is loosely inspired by the writer's own life and his own struggles. And you can really tell there's an authenticity to it. Yeah, written by Francois Boulet, who is French Canadian, obviously. Um, yeah, it's just this like encapsulation of all of the emotions of growing up queer in a family culture time where that was not accepted. It's a very angry film at times, which I was not expecting. That's not something you see usually in this genre. Um, which yeah, it's a very like this character because he is struggling so much with his identity. He's lashing out at the people around him. Leads to some very like complicated but interesting family dynamics. There's also just like Jean-Marc Vallée, who unfortunately passed away pretty young. But he was such a like great visual director in like a very understated way. Here there's like just a lot of little stylistic elements that are coming in, but especially the use of songs. This had like a massive budget, in part because they wanted to use specific songs and get the rights to specific songs and build entire sequences around them. The most popular one is probably the Sympathy for the Devil sequence, where he's imagining, the character is imagining the entire Catholic church around that he's going to for Christmas mass, singing the song. It's a very interesting sequence, but my favorite is the Space Oddity sequence. That's the David Bowie song, maybe my favorite song of all time, and this sequence is just so gorgeously made. It has perhaps one of the most subtly beautiful shots I've ever seen, where the foreground is a wall and there's like a little mirror on the wall, and we're watching the character as he's dancing in the mirror, and then he turns around and he's painted his face like Ziggy Stardust. And it's just like, it's very profound, but in a very like, it doesn't look flashy or anything. So yeah, I watching this, I was just drawn in by the style and the emotions of it. And yeah, this is one not super well known outside of Canada, but is definitely worth checking out if that is of interest.
You know me.
We know.
Yep.
I find it kind of funny that on the poster it says winner of 10 Genie Awards, Canadian Oscars.
Yep. Yeah, they did specify, tried to but yeah, no, this was like super successful in Canada and then didn't really make its way out.
Similar to what I said, but not exactly. This was already in my watch list. So,
Okay.
yeah.
How about you?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Me. My number one film is called Welcome to Dongmakgol. Base story is it's set during the Korean War, and there's a few soldiers from the north and then a few soldiers from the south who happen upon a village at the same time. And this village basically has no knowledge of war. They've kind of just been their own little community. And so the soldiers are like, put your hands up! And they're like, why? And the guns are of no threat to them, and they're like poking, and the soldiers are like offended, like, why aren't you respecting my authority right now? We have a gun, we can shoot you. And they have no knowledge of what that means, really. Yeah, and so I think due to like lack of I forget why they end up stranded in the village, but they're stranded in the village, and then all three parties kind of have to work together, as the soldiers become part of the community and set aside their differences. It's a beautiful movie. I don't like war. I don't see the point of it. Like, I understand, like, disagreements occur. Maybe I'm not understanding enough why war has to exist, but I don't like it. So seeing this movie of like two opposing sides, like, set aside their differences and come to appreciate each other as humans is so beautiful to me, and I absolutely love this movie. Yeah, high praise for this movie.
You
Yeah,
know
I,
me.
I haven't seen this one, but it is interesting hearing your summary, and I am curious, like the Korean cultural perspective on this, since that the tension of war is very present in Korea at all times. So I am curious to know a little bit more about how that played into the messaging of the film, and sort of maybe a more hopeful look at the future.
And also one additional thing, the composer is is the is Miyazaki's composer.
Oh, yeah. Why am I blanking on his name?
Yeah, so like this the story first off is like based off a stage play, and so yeah, as they were making this film, they were like, "Oh, it would be really cool if like we got him," because like as they were making this film, they were really like it would be incredible if like they had his sound attached to the movie, and they wrote him a letter, and I think the composer was moved by the passion of the letter, and so I believe this is his first, if not only, uh, Korean feature that he composed music for. And I think
Okay.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And, that's Joe Hisaishi is the composer. Yeah, I did not know that, and that makes me curious now to listen to the soundtrack at least and see how
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Well, moving on to my number one. My number one is every other film on this list that I haven't talked about so far.
Yay!
Yeah, all amazing, all influential. But for realsies, my number one pick that I'm going to talk about for now is Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith. This is the most influential film in my entire childhood, as this was my very first Star Wars film that I saw in theaters. And yeah, it absolutely blew my mind. Before I watched this film, I the only thing I knew about Star Wars was what the other kids at school would tell me. I go to a friend's house, they'd show me their toys and be like, this is Star Wars. Here's the lore that I made up, which was absolutely false, of course. Um, but at school, uh, after school, a group of students, they would bring their lightsabers to school. You know, we were that type of school that allowed weapons, children to bring in weapons. They would have like a huge lightsaber fight after school. And I remember being like, oh, I want to participate. And they're like, no, John, no. You don't have a lightsaber. You've never seen Star Wars. Be gone, idiot. Uh, so yeah, I watched this film and I was like, it's so fantastic. This film has so much going in it. It's like visually every few minutes there's like an action sequence. It looks so cool. The beginning space battle was just like, oh, all this stuff that I never thought was possible in the imagination was like possible. You have a character with 4 arms and lightsabers. All the fights were pretty cool. I loved all the characters. This is a pretty dark film for like a kid to get into, but like, I loved it. And after this point, I was like severely hooked. I finally got lightsaber toys. I got toys of characters, and I watched all the films, and it was like the one thing that was part of my character at in real life was that I liked Star Wars a lot, and so yeah, I owe it to this film. Yes.
Yeah, Christopher, do you have Star Wars thoughts here?
I do have thoughts actually. So, I probably recounted this journey before, and I might as well just go in length again. So John came over to visit me one day, and we went to see Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness for his birthday, and
Was it my birthday? I
uh,
thought it was your birthday.
it was your birthday. It was May. My
Okay.
birthday's October. Um, and the intention of him coming out was to get me indoctrinated into Star Wars, and
No.
um, the question was, when will we start? A lot sooner than uh, I might have dreamed, because Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness was a disappointment in the moment. I think since then, I've come to appreciate what it is. Um, but in the moment, I was severely disappointed. And I said, you know what, John, we're watching Star Wars next day. So we did, and then it became John's. If I was disappointed for one movie, John had to live that experience over and over again in me, in my reception to Star Wars, as I crushed his soul every few hours as we went through these movies. I will say, like, I was watching when I watched these movies before, I was more open to the possibility of what movies are, to put it lightly. Um, and I think there's a possibility maybe I'd appreciate them a little more. I definitely appreciate what they are in terms of history and production, but I don't necessarily appreciate the products that much. I'm curious what a reassessment would look like today. Um, but yeah, I will say as I went through watching the movies, I started to understand the vision a little more with each picture. You know, just with the episode 5, you liked it a little more than episode 4, and then episode 6 had the Ewoks.
Yeah.
Love those guys. Um, and then go into Phantom Menace, and you know, a little more enjoyment, and then also with me not necessarily being used to older films, kind of enjoyed the more modern sensibility of it. Then dipped a little low with Attack of the Clones. Um, I never knew someone could be so passionate about sand, whether in love or in hatred. Um, I paused. I probably mentioned it in a previous episode. I paused like 5 times during that scene because I was cringing so hard. Anyways, it had been a very rough journey. And then we get to this movie. Now, what my greatest recent exposure at the time to movies were Marvel films, and I was really blown away by, like, how much of a character story like Iron Man was, and it really kind of seemed to focus on characters. And for me, going into Star Wars, I kind of went into it with that expectation, and it's not that until Revenge of the Sith, where I really do feel like it dives into the character of Anakin, and we really ride with him in this journey of these moral dilemmas. And yeah, we truly, I finally got a character story that I didn't get while watching the previous movies, or at least that I personally could see or appreciate. And yeah, so completely went on the journey with Anakin, and saw saw his ultimate descent. I was really emotionally moved um after finishing the movie. I was completely surprised, like, how invested I was and how much it had affected me afterwards. Um so I've only still seen it that one time, but I definitely hold this movie in high regard. I really enjoy the character story it took me on, and yeah, it is without a doubt my favorite Star Wars movie. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a very different. I am not by any means a prequel apologist. I have some nostalgia for them, but I actually have more nostalgia for the Lego Star Wars version of these films and the actual films themselves. I think of the three, I remember this one most fondly, perhaps because it's the one I have seen the least, and so I'm not as familiar with its faults. I think there are a lot of great moments. The opening battle, John already mentioned, the seat of the Chancellor taking over. I'm sure that will never have any application to our real world politics. The Order 66 scene, the Mustafar fight, like these are all these great visual moments and story moments. And overall, like, I love this overarching story of the prequel trilogy, of this it is following this man and how his fear is manipulated and turns into hatred, and then around him the entire galaxy is succumbing to fascism. It's like his arc is mirrored by the entire universe. That's really cool. This is also the movie where Anakin goes from, hey, this Chancellor guy seems a little suspicious, to killing children over the course of an afternoon. There's like 2 hours. The sun is setting, and he's like, I don't really like this Chancellor guy. The sun has then set, and he's like, yes, Chancellor guy, I will kill these children. No, that's not how character arcs work. There's just like little, not even little, that's a giant major story issue of like, yeah, Christopher, as you were saying, this is this incredibly resonant story of Anakin's fall. Like, that is a very compelling idea, but each step along the way feels like it's going a little bit farther than it should be going, and it feels like maybe this is a story that needs a little bit more time to develop. The dialogue, George Lucas can't write dialogue. I'm sorry. Whatever. It's also like there's a lot of silliness here, especially like we have this great emotionally intense fight on Mustafar between Anakin and Obi-Wan, and this like brother against brother. There's so much emotion going on there, and then every once in a while we cut to like Yoda and Darth Sidious having this like weird fight that would feel too cartoony for the cartoons, throwing stuff at each other and going rah, 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 jumping around. It's like, no, I don't. I can't. I love the idea of the prequels, but there's just so much in them that does not work for me. Yeah, that's my spiel on that topic.
Yeah, I can't lie. I'm definitely blinded by my emotional journey with Anakin, and I don't remember much else from the film. Like, legitimately, I don't remember dialogue. I don't remember goofy moments. I just remember the resonance I had with the story.
It is something that I forget pretty much every time I watch it, that the Mustafar fight, because that's so totemic, and you're like, oh, this great sequence, and then you sit down to watch it and you're like, why are they cutting to Yoda and Darth Sidious? Do they think the fight scene is not compelling enough on its own that they think we need another separate fight scene?
I honestly don't even remember that. That's how much I blocked out. It sounds really
John,
funny.
I hope that's not
it.
your
Hey John, be glad I liked one movie.
So, why didn't we continue this negativity with our least favorite films of the year?
Yeah, my least favorite is, I'm not even gonna preface it. It's Chicken Little. During this project, one of my things has been I've been trying to watch each of the Disney animation releases for each year that I haven't seen. This one is so bad. It's a nothing movie. Like, nothing happens. That if I tell you the story is Chicken Little thinks the sky is falling, but it's actually aliens, okay, you now know the entire plot of this movie. You can construct it on your own in your head, and it will probably be more compelling than what they did here. This is very much Disney trying to do a sort of DreamWorksy, not even necessarily DreamWorks, but this is an era of Disney where the Disney Renaissance had been this massive embrace of classic Disney ideas of like princesses and fairy tales and all of this stuff. And then with Shrek, that kind of killed all of that off by being a satire, while also being a pretty good film on its own. And now Disney didn't know what to do, so they decided to try and do whatever Chicken Little is. And it's not a whole lot of much. It did do financially well enough to keep the studio going for a little bit longer, but this era of Disney animation is just dire because they followed this up with like Meet the Robinsons and Bolt, which are not good movies. It's sad. This is Disney killed their 2D animation for this, and it makes me sad. Not that Home on the Run or Home on the Range is all that good either. Luckily, eventually they did figure it out again with Tangled and kind of going back to another sort of Disney Renaissance. But yeah, Chicken Little is just a very dire film from a time in Disney animation history that is not fun to revisit.
I remember liking it a lot back then. But yeah, when I think back on it as an adult, it's like not really good. It's like even the stuff that happens, like a character gets brainwashed, and we leave that character completely brainwashed, and in this romance that
Yes.
they have, they never would have ever entered. But then now they're fixed, and it's like, huh, that's kind of not okay.
uh, yeah, it is not worth watching because it is a nothing movie, but it does have moments like that that are like, what were you thinking?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Looking at this animation, I 100% would have guessed it was DreamWorks and never Disney. I'm legitimately surprised this is a Disney release.
Yeah, it is not good.
All right, Christopher.
Respectfully, my last movie is or worst movie or least favorite movie. Well, is Fantastic Four. Just looking at the list I gave again, like I mentioned with like honorable mentions, I don't remember the Heffalump Halloween movie. I didn't feel like it was fair enough to say, "Oh, that's my least favorite." I don't remember it. Um, so out of the movies I do more or less remember, I am respectfully putting Fantastic Four at the bottom because it's not the strongest movie on my list, but again, I found enjoyment from it. But there are definitely some things from it I don't enjoy. Um, yeah, so it is a mixed bag, and for me, it's for the one time I watched it, a more positive mixed bag. But I don't necessarily know if it's a mixed bag I am anxious to revisit. I think there was one sequence, I will say, there was one fight sequence at the end where I think like they break through a pool, and that was fun to see. Uh, yeah. Um,
But the pool was like not on ground level of a hotel. It was
was
like,
not on grind level.
yeah.
um, so yeah, and yeah, I'll let Jay talk, and I think one
What
thing he'll mention is also one of my major
my
dissatisfaction with the movie or
I do have
Twilight
like
Zone.
one dissatisfaction. Is it and it's like what this film did to Jessica Alba
Yes.
and just her after her horrible experience with these films, she's like, maybe I want to quit acting. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't like how she's portrayed in these movies. Like, I think both movies have basically like a nude esque moment that are completely unnecessary and just
Hmm.
to get her naked. It's ridiculous.
And
It,
also like the one criticism was like, hey, can you just like cry prettier? That's like one thing that she remembers.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Jay.
I don't really have much to say about this. I just thought I would save my thoughts for when we were talking about it negatively instead of John trying to talk about the positives of it. Yeah, I don't remember a lot of this movie besides Chris Evans, who I remember a lot of in this movie. Um, yeah, I don't really know what to say beyond just I don't find it super memorable. Um, just kind of like generic superhero movie from this era. I know some people have nostalgia for it, including John, but I don't have much fondness.
Well, speaking of
You're just
things that
crushing John.
Well, speaking of things that I really don't like, we have Son of the Mask, which was a very long awaited sequel to the first film that had a terrible production hell where uh like pretty much after the first film came out, like they're like, we're gonna do a second one. And then they had a competition. It's like, okay, winners of this competition, you're gonna be cast as extras in this film. And so it took them like so long before the extras actually got to the film when they found out it's like, oh, Jim Carrey's not on this film and neither is anyone else from the first film. Oh, that's bad. But hey, maybe it will be good. It's not good. It's bad. It is so bad. The CGI between a baby and a dog is terrible. The plot doesn't is no good. It's just no good all the way around. It's not as funny. Like there's nothing funny in here. So yeah, I despised this film a lot because I liked the first one. So yeah,
How is Alan Cumming in it? Is he any redeeming amount of quality here?
no. So
Okay.
I had no idea he was in this film. So looking at him here, it's like, oh, he's playing the villain. I did not like the villain at all. But
Okay.
maybe if I
Yeah.
watched it again, I'd be more lenient. But no, I just did not like this film at all. Ugh. Okay.
Yeah, I'm surprised this didn't win the Razzie because this is a well known disappointment. Was it even nominated? Now I gotta look this up. This is not important.
I don't know, but yeah, yeah. What else can I really
8
say about
nominations.
this
Yep.
this film? Yeah, you know, we talked about its production briefly. Its plot is nonsensical. There's a sequence in here that I cannot believe they actually did. So there you go.
Wait, Alan
That's
Cumming got a Worst Supporting Actor nomination for this?
Ooh.
That's mean. I don't like the Razzies. We don't need to get into that.
yes. Well, that's kind of all we have for 2005 this year. That where things happened. Yeah.
Yep,
Well,
things happened. Movies came out, were released.
a lot of it was influential. And there you go. Anyway, thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.